Morning, everybody.
Morning.
Good morning.
You all are early. Wait, there it is. It's 9 o'clock now.
You got your computer up.
I'm on my laptop because
Okay.
it's at 2%. Might be a while.
Anne, did you cut your hair?
All off. Totally gone.
Wow, looks nice.
Thank you. I got tired of fighting with it. It's been a long haul, so.
Oh, give just a couple more minutes for people to get on. Elizabeth, I like your brain. Is that a ferret?
Thank you. It is a ferret. Yeah,
Yeah.
I have a ferret brain.
Didn't quite look like a human or a mouse.
Somewhere in between.
We're in. Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. I think we'll probably have a few more people hop on, but there's some faces here that I don't think everybody knows. So I don't want to take a lot of time, but hoping maybe we can just, really quickly introduce ourselves. And I'll start with the way they are on my screen. So Elena.
Hello. It's nice to meet you all. My name is Elena. I am the event coordinator for BIO5 Institute, and I work with Amy.
Yeah, speaking of Amy.
Hello, I'm Amy Randall Barber. I'm the manager for marketing and events for the BIO5 Institute.
Anne? You're muted.
Sorry about that. I'm Anne, the director of Viper Institute, and also I run the IDRC, Infectious Disease Research Core, up on the 3rd floor of Keating. And yeah, so we work with bugs and snakes. So a little bit of everything, mostly noxious. So
Great. Blake.
Hey, good morning. My name is Blake Joyce. I'm the Assistant Director of Research Computing for the university.
Great. Lauren?
Hi, I'm Lauren Melcher. I work in the Wertheimer lab, so for the Viper Institute and the IDRC, also with bugs and snakes.
Up on the 3rd floor of Keating, it looks like.
Mhm.
Yep. Chris?
I'm Chris. I'm a plant chemical ecologist, relatively new to BIO5, also on the 3rd floor.
Great. Elizabeth?
Hi, I'm Beth Hutchinson. I'm also relatively new. I'm a faculty member in the BME department, and I'm in the BSRL on the 3rd floor. I work on MRI and preclinical models.
Brooke?
Good morning, I'm Brooke Moreno. I'm a program coordinator for the public affairs team at BIO5, and I also primarily focus on the KEYS program. So I bother many of you with lab requests and hosting students, which many of you have, so.
Yeah, thank you, everybody who's doing that. Tamara? Oh, you're muted.
My speakers don't work, so I don't know if I can't hear anything. I can only hear from Jody's computer. I don't know what's going on.
Okay, sorry, but you're down in the media lab? Yep. All right, we'll have Jody explain. Jody, why don't you introduce both of you?
Tamara and I can't get on video. So it's kind of like we work side by side. Tamara is the administration manager for the meeting facility, and I'm the production manager for the meeting facility, BIO5 Institute.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Victor. I think maybe you just froze. No, there you go. We can't hear you though.
Hello?
Yeah, there we go.
Sorry about that. My name is Victor Ruby. I'm Regents Professor in the Department of Chemistry and Biochemistry down on the main campus. I've been a member of BIO5 since it started, so been around for a long time, been at this university for 51 years.
Oh, well.
I work in the relationship between the brain and the body. Hormones, neurotransmitters, G protein coupled receptors, a lot.
Great, great. Let's see, Peter. Peter, you're muted. All right, we'll come back. Regina.
Morning, everyone. My name is Regina Ozeda. I am a project manager. I work with our public affairs team.
Thank you. Lomax?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Lomax Boyd. I'm the manager of infrastructure services, meaning I'm the computer person, network manager of the buildings both Keating and BSRL, kind of all things computer related.
Thank you. Peter? You're muted, Peter.
In the chat, he said something about having some problems with his video and microphone.
Okay, so Peter works in the business office for BIO5. And Kelly? Let's see.
Is it Kelly Highland?
Yeah, sorry.
Hi, that's okay. I didn't know if the other Kelly was there.
No,
Hi,
no,
I'm
you're
Kelly
really
Highland
Kelly
and yeah, I work for the Keys Research internship. I'm a program coordinator, and we are actually recruiting for Keys right now. So if you know anyone that's interested, please send them our way. Thank you.
Yeah, we're going to need more mentors than ever this next summer, right? So we're hoping that lots of you will be interested in either having an in-person, we hope, or a virtual intern this coming summer. John Paul.
Thank you.
Hi, Jennifer. Thanks. Hi.
Hi.
I'm Paul Sangiovanni. Hey, I'm a researcher. My appointment is in the Nutritional Sciences Department. I've been a member of the BIO5 since I think it was August of 2019, and I'm actually sitting in the BSRL building on the bridge in 371. Thanks.
Great. Let's see. Robert Sandoval, our intrepid building manager.
Hi, I'm Robert Sandoval. I'm the facility manager for the Keating and the BSRL buildings. I help you with all things related to building and infrastructure to the two buildings.
Thank you. Yeah, and my pleas about dying plants on the side of the building. Yeah, just about everything. Kate.
Good morning, everybody. This is Kate Riley, and I'm the Director of Finance and Operations for BIO5.
Great. So let's see. Chris, it looks like you're connected now. Chris Redondo. But you're muted. All right. Anybody I missed? Yeah, Chris, if you can hear us when you get your audio, please introduce yourself. Well, thank you again for being here. And I like to introduce everybody, even though some of us are seeing people, on and on, because it just helped to make a little bit of a community here. And so first thing I want to say is if you have ideas for topics you'd like to discuss at these roundtables, please send them in to me, or into Elena. And I know there's been a question about the libraries and the services that we get there. I saw an email coming out just the other day that again, those will be cut. They're experiencing a lot of budget shortages. So I know that's a concern to a lot of people. But today I wanted to talk about the topic that I actually suggested this one because it happens to me all the time. How do we effectively engage, especially undergraduate students in our lab? It seems like either we need them and we can't find them, or we've got a jillion of them emailing us incessantly saying, can I work in your lab? And I think, I'd start off with the assumption that we're really lucky here at the University of Arizona to have truly amazing undergraduates. Now, admittedly, we have some undergraduates who aren't truly amazing, but we've got so many undergraduates, and the top tier of those undergraduates are just fantastic people, just amazing, amazing, amazing. Some of them were our Keys High School students that we convinced to come here when they could have gone to Stanford or Harvard instead. Some of them choose to stay in Arizona for family reasons, economic reasons, or because they just realize that they have the opportunity to get a really top tier education here. And I think from my students that I've had in my lab who have gone to other universities that may be nominally more prestigious, one of the things they realize is that they had it really good here, right? They, as an undergraduates, had the opportunity to work in world-class laboratories and do amazing research and contribute to society. And all of a sudden, they find out that it's not that way at all universities. Not all universities welcome undergraduates into their labs. So I think I'm going to start from the assumption that it's a good thing that we all want to have undergraduates in our lab, but it still comes with challenges. So I'm curious to hear from you all. What are the challenges and opportunities you see with undergraduates? So just jump in. If this gets to be chaotic, we can use the chat, but I think we can just talk.
So I tend to get the really young ones. So I sort of get the entry level. I end up having to teach. So we're working with a lot of omics applications in my laboratory. So I find that they come out of high school, they may know a little bit about omics, but part of it is ramping them up. So one of the things that I do is we have peer mentors. I have about 20 students in my lab right now, and they're all virtual, but we have peer mentors. What I'm finding, Jennifer, is that they're all very interested in understanding things about, they still have this optimism when they come in as freshmen. They haven't gone through the physical chemistry class, and then they sort of roll into this organic chemistry thing, and they're trying to find their way out of the weeds, but still learn about the things that really excite them. So I think, my kids actually developed their own seminar series. They came to us, and there might be a way that you can get an organization. So we were on the call last week with Maikana, and I was just so amazed at her ability to take her course and actually build a business with her undergrads. If we can get the undergraduates together in some way, give them agency to invite their own speakers, because it's just like taken off in my lab, so that's one thing. And they're engaged because they communicate with it. They want to present this really good seminar, and it's up to them. It's by them and for them. So that might be one thing we can do. The other thing that I think that's really important, and if you talk about leveraging excellence at this university, so it's really known for its optics, right? So I'm wondering if there are things. I sit on all these advisory committees, and I'm like, where's the engineer? Where's the engineer? We need an engineer. So I'm wondering if there's anything that can be done as sort of like a principles of engineering, that's sort of a seminar series that they're not required to go to, but if they sort of understand how to see things from an engineering perspective, and if it could come from optics, I think that would be great, because the people in optics, the applications that they are working in, they cross all boundaries. It's optogenetics, it's physiologic imaging, it's, design, it's, applications in agriculture, remote sensing. So I don't know, what I would say is maybe think about a broader approach to getting a student-based seminar series where they organize it and invite the people. And then secondly, something that integrates engineering, it makes it accessible to anyone. So those are two things I think.
Awesome ideas. Does anybody have any thoughts on those? Yeah, Victor.
So I've been here for a long time, and I've had over 250 undergraduates in my laboratory. from every department, from about 10 different departments, both on the north and the south side of Speedway. So it's all you have to do is make it clear that you're open to having undergraduates in your laboratory, and that you take them from any place. In fact, I got one of my top persons. I mean, I have many that are now famous all over the world, but one of my best stories goes way back to my early days. Got a person who's a philosophy major. He is now one of the top persons in the United States in public health. He's one of the managers for the Midwest. They would let him into medical school here. He was because he was a philosophy major, but I got him into Johns Hopkins, which is the best public health place in the world. And I told them, this kid, he only was in my lab a year, but he published a paper. Okay. So, I mean, he didn't have hardly any chemistry or anything, any biology, but he decided when he was studying philosophy that he wanted to get into public health. So you could do all kinds of interesting things with people that are really very different. And this really makes your research much more broad. I mean, these people come in, undergraduates, and they can have good ideas that are different from what your ideas are, because I'm a chemist and a biochemist. But and so so I really advise that. I value people in psychology and philosophy, and not to mention, of course, chemistry and biochemistry and biology. But I think this is very important, to open your lab to people who, for one reason or another, get interested, because you never know what they're going to bring to your lab that you've never thought of before.
Yeah, that's really nice. I think I'm hearing a lot of admiration for their enthusiasm for undergraduates' new ideas, for thinking outside the box, and you know, the idea of how then you get them up to speed when we're all busy anyway. I've heard the idea of peer mentoring. Does anybody else do that, or do you have other tactics for helping undergraduates get up to speed?
You talking to me?
No, I just anybody on here who has, you know. So I guess I should start off with a more basic question: who has undergraduates in their lab, or who mentors undergraduates in their lab? So okay, all right. So I guess you know, Blake, how do you handle that? Because you must have a lot of training that you need to do for the ones who come in fresh.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. My background is ecology and molecular biology, and so I'm kind of a recovering scientist. But we still do a lot of research, software engineering and research computing, obviously, in my group. And you know, I think maybe at some point we'll talk about that. Maybe next month, is that right, Amy? But basically, we have a lot of undergraduates who come to us from all the different departments, who are really interested in using the supercomputers, or learning how to do statistical consulting, or how to do data and visualizations, advanced visualizations. So we get a mixture of a lot of different kinds of undergrads from different departments, as I was saying. And so a lot of what we do is just get them into projects, and specifically try to figure out the need that what is a marketable skill, and what is it that they're really interested in. We're mostly a service-based organization, and so it's pretty easy once I understand like what it is that they're interested in learning, and then setting them up with a project to actually accomplish that learning through doing, right? And that solves two problems. First, once they are out of my lab, they can go and say, I did this thing, here it is, look at it, I'm ready to go, which is quite nice. And then the second is also, it gets them kind of embedded with different researchers around the campus. And so that also gives them it makes them feel like they're part of the research community instead of a student of the research community. So I like to have, you know, specific projects that we set up and that they run, and kind of, you know, we make them small enough and wall them in enough to where they don't, you know, run off into the wild blue yonder unless they really want to. But that's how I go about it.
Great. Beth, what do you do?
So something a little bit similar where we're sort of project based, and we form little working groups, I guess, and it just sort of depends on the students. I should mention my lab's a little bit smaller. I have 2 PhDs, 1 master's, and then 4 undergraduates. And actually a high school student who stayed on from Keys and is doing research in the lab from that, and he's fantastic. And so, but it works out well and oddly well in the pandemic environment because we do a lot of image processing, actually on the HPC and software. So there are very general skills that everyone needs to know. And we have little training sessions for those that I lead at first, but then as the graduate students are learning, it's a good chance for them to lead. And then we have little working groups where it's project based and they each sort of have ownership over their own small thing, like Blake was saying. I think it's nice for motivation. But then they have the support of someone working on that data with them. And then I'll check in with the working groups maybe once a week if they need it, or every other week. And then they give weekly updates at the lab meeting. So that's sort of an ecosystem approach, I guess, but with everyone having their own little niche.
That's nice. So that's a way of multiplying yourself. You know, I struggle with that myself, and you know that I'd love to take more undergraduates, but if I devote, you know, every week a half an hour to every undergraduate I have in my lab for a weekly check-in, it starts adding up really quickly. Yeah, Chris, I think I saw you raise your hand before. You had to turn off your video. Do you have an undergraduate in your lab now?
I don't have any undergraduates in the lab here at UA. I was raising my hand because I've had undergraduates in the past and
yeah,
you know, I've published with them and have had experiences, both successes and challenges in working with undergrads. So I don't know from an Arizona perspective how much my experience will be of value, but I figured I should raise my hand anyway.
I suspect people are people, right? So tell us about one of your great opportunities that came out of that, and maybe a challenge too.
Well, so one of the ways that I have approached sort of all mentorship in my lab has been to try to understand where the students ultimately see themselves going, then provide so this balance between wanting to get work done for my science and also recognizing that most of the people who come through my lab aren't going to want to do my science forever. They're going to have their own goals and objectives and things that they want to achieve from working in the lab. So they either want to get a set of skills or they want to sort of figure out what the lab is like to begin with. And so one of the things that I spend a lot of time with when I recruit undergraduate students is trying to make sure that I am keyed in to where they want to go. So the successes have been helping students who did thesis projects with me are now in med school, for example. And so making sure that I was the support structure that they needed to put their best foot forward on a medical school application, for example, which is something we all do, I'm sure, but those have been my greatest successes, is watching, you know, and it's not so much about ultimately the project that I do. Just at the end of the day, I'll never be famous for the science I do, but I do like the idea of building people up and helping them achieve their objectives.
I just wanted to say, Chris, you know, what I tell my students when they come in is my objective is to get them to the next step. And I think I think you're exactly right. I think that's the greatest thing that we can do. But the other thing I also tell them is that once they've come to the lab, they can never really leave. So we have alumni. I have this organized on my website. I don't know, is it possible to share my screen? Because when they have this identity in the lab, I had 20 kids this summer and only one didn't come back, and they are from all these other departments. But I think the social aspect and the interaction in these sort of self-organizing systems that are occurring through our meetings are amazing. They have movie nights. I mean, they got together to watch a movie about Oliver Stone. I didn't start that. You know, they're doing this because they have this identity. But I don't know, is there any way Jennifer, can I share my screen quickly? Is there a way to do
I don't
this?
know.
Go ahead.
Can you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so basically we use this thing called Slack, and I don't know if you can see my screen, but I sort of tune in with them. I call them fellows and scholars, so they sort of have this identity, and so we give little assignments, and I have them through these anonymous interactions tell me how they're doing on things. I don't know if you can see this, but this one is a computer person banging his head. So we're doing this thing with the group, but we also have on our webpage, as I said, they have that identity. And let me just see if I can get there. So on our webpage, we have this section that says who we are. And I have the team for 2020, summer, fall, and spring. So each of them have this LinkedIn profile. They're required to have a LinkedIn profile. So we have them in their own groups. And so, for instance, anyone can come down who visits the lab and see, what my students are doing. So we have omics, we have mechanistic studies, and then our other one is a physiologic imaging thing. But anyone can just come into the lab, click on the LinkedIn profile from our lab as a launchpad, and they use this all the time. They connect with each other. There are 14 mutual connections in my lab, and we have this network, and their identity, is as a mechanistic studies branch scholar. It will be there for not eternity, but, anyone can go to this site. I'm going to stop sharing this, but this is just one way that we do it. And it's just this community with COVID has been so hard. They don't come into the lab. So we're using these tools to unite them. And the thing is, it's just growing. They're doing it on their own, which is really inspiring to me. So I think that there are ways, just because, here I am, I'm a scholar in this lab. So I always tell them, well, scholarship, research, service, this is what I was taught. That's what science is about. And they get that. They understand that just because they can't be in the lab, they can still be scientists. But these are just some things we're doing. The LinkedIn is key because they're facing outward. You talked a lot, Chris, I'm sorry. The person who talked before me is Chris. I'm sorry. You talked a lot about getting your kids to the next step, and they understand there's a way to do that. So I think, to me, I'll feel great when my kids get where they're going to land in grad school or professional school. I haven't had that experience yet, but it's something I think, that they understand they're part of this group. Anyhow.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. That's, we talked a little bit last time about how to keep in communication. And I know, there's Slack. I use Slack, but there's some other free tools available here on campus. And those are great ways to make sure that people, check in and are doing okay. I like your check-ins and the way you're dealing with so many students. Other thoughts? Philip, do you want to introduce yourself? And you have undergraduate students in your lab, I know.
Hey, Jennifer. Yeah, I have quite a lot of undergraduates. At the moment, not so many. The way that we engage the students at the moment is by sending projects home to them. So we have a lot of programming related things, some hardware that's with microcontroller that they take on. So a lot of my students do home lab. So yeah, but usually we have about up to 20 undergraduates in the laboratory doing various things. And we have a system that generally is using the PhDs as mentors for the undergraduates. And I check in with them on a regular basis, maybe every 2 weeks or so, have a short meeting with them to see what's going on. But the PhDs, they use the undergrads to further their projects. The undergraduates get trained, and that way everyone wins. And we have undergraduates that they spend a little bit of time in the lab, maybe an hour or two in a week, and some are there a significant amount of time. I have students that have co-authored 5 or so papers that are on track to go to a great school, and there are some that just lose interest. So I don't have any kind of boundaries there. I usually let them engage with the lab as much as they please. That's kind of my philosophy, and it has been working decently, I would say.
Great, thanks for sharing. And I know that we have a lot of undergraduates within our BIO5 staff as well, and in our cores. Do any of the media facility or public affairs folks want to explain how they engage with undergraduates?
I know, I'm trying. Yes, we have, at the moment, we have 4 undergraduate students. 1 undergraduate student has been with us for 3 years. The other 3 were hired last year. I do use peer mentoring in the sense that their primary responsibility is making fly food, and they learn from each other, which I think is good because it gives them a sense of empowerment. The more experienced students teaching younger students. This was pre-pandemic, because right now I don't have any of them here at the same time. I alternate them to keep everybody safer because we're in a very small lab. But I think that's important. That gives them ownership. It helps them understand better. I have a master's in education, and what I have found too is giving them the respect factor, that I'm open to anything they can suggest, because I'm not always involved in the day-to-day tasks that they have, and they will give me ideas. I want them to feel engaged, and I think that's important to getting them in buy-in with things. They're all excellent students. Most of them are biomedical engineering students. They're excellent, they're smart, and acknowledging that and giving them that sense of ownership of the projects that they're working on, I think is really important to keeping them engaged. And like I said, we've had very good retention with our students. They tend to stay because they know they're integral to the success of the media facility, and we appreciate them.
Great. Thanks.
I can actually second what she was saying. As far as our team's concerned, we integrate the students on our team as though they're staff members. We don't treat them any different. They are given responsibilities and tasks just like a staff person. Obviously their hours are less because of school, but their ideas are welcome on the table and asked for on the table, just like a staff person. They're not just given menial tasks and like small, filing kind of stuff. They're actually part of our operation.
Awesome. Anybody else have any thoughts on this subject?
I'd like to add from the Keys perspective. So we engage high school students from 16 to 18. We also engage with graduating high school seniors between that summer of starting up college. And we've made the opportunities to work with a large group of students every summer, 50 students from across the state. We get a really diverse sampling of students, and not formal research evaluation, but informally some really cool takeaways about how to engage highly capable students. If you're interested, we can follow up and talk about how we've discovered the meaningfulness of having levels of mentorship available to your students, curriculum that supports project-based learning, intentionally diverse staffing, mentorship, speakers that represent identities not commonly found in the fields. We've found a lot of interesting pedagogy that supports students into STEM degrees and careers. And we also have a really great alumni community where we continue to support them and offer resources of getting into labs, not just at the university, but other places as well. Mm-hmm. In addition, we also provide a tip sheet, tips for getting into a lab generally to students, anyone that contacts us looking for lab positions. And I don't know the success of that, but if you're interested in seeing that, we're happy to share that as well.
Maybe we need to have you give us a short seminar on the things that you found, because I think, I tend to do this kind of haphazardly, and unless unless I have a particular grant that I need to hire a student on, it tends to be very much whoever just comes and, knocks on the door and says, can you take me into your lab, right? I don't tend to do it terribly intentionally. That would be really interesting.
To follow up on what Brooke was saying about the Key students, we've managed to keep a couple of Key students on, and I find that's been really rewarding because of the Keys program, they get some fundamental training in a lot of different areas, and they come in. A couple of people mentioned it's really hard to get them started, but I think the Keys program and even the SIMI program from College of Medicine, they come in with some more basis, which is just super helpful as a pretty complicated lab setup. They understand, oh, safety. There's other regulations in play here, and they've already been introduced to that, but on a more professional level, which I think is super helpful. They don't just think that we're making things up to cause grief for them. They really appreciate the bigger picture of science and the responsibility. So I'm really grateful for the Keys program. So I just want to throw that out there. It's helped us a lot.
I think that continuity is key, Anne. I'm taking on very freshmen, and it's okay. It's making my life amazingly difficult, but still, I mean, they're growing into their ideals. They're moving forward. And I'm lucky enough to have some really good upperclassmen who are acting as peer mentors. But you're right, if people can go through this process from the time they're 18, this is like an apprenticeship model in a way. If I think about it, what happens in Europe with the skilled trades, what was happening 200 years ago, that's how people really develop a sophisticated understanding if they come into it when they're young. And if you can retain people and they see value in, and they see just a path forward, I think that's really the way to go. It really makes it hard though when you have more than half your kids are freshmen that have come in during COVID, but still, as long as they come back, right? So anyhow.
No, I think getting them early is really key, and having them aware of what's available. I don't know, is there a way, Jennifer, that we can communicate more with some of the academic advisors? Because I think a lot of kids would really like to come into the labs. Like we got a couple really late, but they didn't even know they could, so I wonder, is there a way we can be more available to, especially the freshmen, would be ideal. I agree completely with what John Paul is saying, is they're the best.
So that's a good question. I know of a couple of resources, and if people could chime in with others. So first of all, I believe the College of Science has an Undergraduate Research webpage. I think on UAVTE, you can put down that you are interested in taking undergraduate students. Now, that doesn't help with the students who don't know that they should be looking for that. I know the undergraduate advisor in biomedical engineering very well, my home department, because I helped hire her, but I don't know all the undergraduate advisors in other areas, but yeah, that is a great way to do it. So those people oftentimes can send out notes, saying somebody's looking for, thank you, the undergraduate research page is up. Can they send out notes saying somebody is looking for students? In ways to help the undergraduates know that they should be seeking a career or an opportunity to work in a lab. Again, in biomedical engineering, I teach the freshman class, so I tell them that. Every single one of them then gets that message, but I don't know how it works in any other department. Anybody else know mechanisms? Kate said Gail Bird in the provost's office likely has a list of advisors.
So they send me leads all the time, Jennifer. I mean, probably, 1 in every 5 kids who's come into my lab is Michelle Mendoza. We have a pipeline in nutrition. So I guess if we reach out to the departments and just say it's a priority, I had someone last week, if you can actually believe it, a senior who came in, and I said, where did you hear about us? And she said it was my advisor. So I think just making that, known to the, anyhow, yeah.
Yeah, because on the flip side, I work with a graduate program, and some of the feedback that our students get when they try to get a job is they haven't had enough research experience. So even though they've done a 2-year master's, they're like, that's just not enough time you spent in the lab. And the, you know, at least a couple of them I can think of are just like, well, when do I get that? And it's like, well, when you first start in
Yeah.
college, you know, you're not going to get it in the 2 years that you're in, you know, graduate school. So yeah, that's been, and especially in industry, they're really like, why are they only spending, you know, a year basically doing research? They should have been doing research for several, you know, so.
I think PI can also do something. What I've done when I started, I gave in the clubs that were relevant to my field, and that helped to recruit a great deal of good students that had the skill set already to start being very productive in the lab. So I actively went out and did that, and I can only, you know, encourage other people to do it. It also sets up kind of a pipeline with that club. They know there's a PI that's willing to engage with us, and that usually helps as well.
And I think it helps us to know who's available, because sometimes I get students that I can't handle. You know, we're a small group, so we can only have so many. So to know of other people that are interested, that might be a nice BIO5 thing to have. Yeah.
So Brooke just put up a note about Uva Hilgert, who is our Director of STEM Training, maintains a very large email list of undergraduate and graduate students interested in research. So yeah, Uva had a conflict and he couldn't be here today, but he's very interested in this subject, obviously. And so I think, Brooke, could you put up Uva's email address? So I think if you have students that you can't take, but you think might be of interest to others, you could encourage them to get on that list. Yep, okay, got it twice, awesome. All right, so I have a question for you all. So I'm gonna ask if you'll put in the chat, do you set a minimum number of hours per week that you expect your undergraduates to work? And yeah, what is that and why? Can everybody just put that in the chat? And but if Victor, if you have a comment you want to make, go ahead. Oh, you're muted.
First of all, the student pipeline is very large. So if you start doing things with students, the word will get out. If you do it well, especially, I suppose, I don't know. But I get most of my best students from my previous best students, to be honest. The second thing I tell them is, don't come in to do research. I don't want you to come in and be somebody's bottle washer. You got to come in and do your research. And this is hard work. If you're not willing to work 10 hours a week or more, I'm not interested in you coming into my lab, and you shouldn't be interested in coming to my lab because you'll accomplish nothing. If you want to do research, it's hard work. It's what you do that counts, not how smart you are, how much you know. It's what you do. And so, this has always worked extremely well. Some of my undergraduates become some of my hardest working students because I tell them that from day one. If you want to accomplish something, you have to do it. It works. And the students love it because, you know, if they accomplish something, you get a publication or something, it's something that they can brag about to their fellow students and so forth. So it works in lots of ways, you know. I mean, self-motivation is the key to almost everything, and good students are self-motivated. All you got to do is give them the right to be who they are.
That's great. Yeah, setting expectations, I think, is really, really, really important. The biggest challenges I've seen at any level, actually, this is true in general, right? The biggest problem between the mentor and the mentee, or the supervisor and the employee, or anything is a lack of setting clear expectations, and then everybody agreeing to those expectations and following through. So
exactly.
with undergraduate students who have very little experience with any sort of relationship of this type, that's absolutely important.
But, you know, they catch on very quickly, from my experience anyway, and they understand once they start doing research that you got to do it. There's no shortcuts.
So I'm loving the answers that are popping up here because they're all over. And so I think this also points out the fact that, don't even expect a student who's worked in one lab to understand the expectations of your lab, because they are very different. And I think that has to deal both with personalities of the folks here and the needs of the lab. I tell my students, if you can't work 10 hours a week, you're probably not making progress. So it's probably not going to work. But I'm hearing other people say 3 to 5 hours a week. I'm hearing 5 to 12, depending on their availability. No, students need flexible time. I love the one, if it's a tough semester for someone, I offer that they can just attend lab meetings. I'm more interested in the long term for them. I do meet with them at the semester beginning to come up with a plan that includes time commitment. That's from Beth. And I think that's great because that's the short-term time commitment. Papers and works. Let's see, students need flexibility, but if they can't commit a certain amount of time, generally that hasn't worked well in the past. From Blake. Philip, yeah, if students don't spend the time, they don't get much out of it and drop out relatively quickly. The motivated ones typically spend more than 10 hours anyway. Yeah, it depends. I mean, of course, we're all trying to hire these great students oftentimes who have double majors and 3 minors and, are head of a club and, maybe involved in a Greek society or something like that too. And these are busy people. But, one of my best students, is a biomedical engineering junior, and junior year is usually pretty brutal. Works in my lab, has a whole nother job at Dutch Brothers. And so I asked her, I could have you work more in my lab, and do you really need to be having that job at the coffee shop? And she said, well, that job is from 8 p.m. to midnight or something like that. And that's that's a time when I still have energy and I need something else to do, and I like it, and it gives me a different type of satisfaction than working in your lab. So no. And it's like, well, okay. But what I'm hearing is that setting expectations is really important, regardless of what the number of hours is. Anybody else have any other thoughts on that?
I also like to get their input on what they're looking for in the research, like what's compelling them to want to experience it, so that we can better tailor. Do they just want to learn how to do a lot of different things, or are they really compelled with certain questions, to figure out why they're in it? I think it's been really, really cool, and it's nice because then they end up coming back to learn more, finish the story.
And part of it is also, I think we need to connect them with our peers. I got a message last night that one of my students wants to spend the summer in Australia, and do I know anyone at Monash University? And I try to integrate my students into my own network so they sort of see themselves as, global scientists. One of the things that I made sure that they add to their LinkedIn profiles is whether they speak a language that's not English. And as it turns out, I have colleagues in Japan. I have someone whose mother's Japanese, and she's been in Japan for the past, 9 summers. So she's fluent. So I'm trying to connect. I'm trying to have them always face outwards. And I think that's an important thing. That does take up some of their time. So it's sort of what we would see as those informal chats in the hall, now that everyone's using Zoom and has more or less mastered things like remote communications, although I'm challenged. I do get these, my students on the phone with people, and sometimes we do leverage their skills that are non-scientific skills, and people are connected. One of my former fellows at the NIH he was just married. He's from South Asia. He's from India. And so I have students of South Asian ancestry on my group. And I said, well, I'm going to my first wedding, South Asian wedding. And they were really happy about it. And now they're reaching out to Ankur and, Sanya, and they're connecting with them because they do have these other links. So I have them spend time doing things like that, so that's another way that they can contribute to the lab, but may not have to be Jennifer, you talked about the fact that your student, I'm paraphrasing, needed an emotional release. Okay, I don't know how you would say it, but okay, my son's a chemistry major. He does the same sorts of things. And I'm like, why aren't you in the lab? And he's like, oh, I can't devote 18 hours to chemistry every day. But these sorts of things, link them to the science, give them that emotional release. And I think that, we have so much, they bring so much to the table. These kids floor me, what they have done and what they know. So I think that's something I integrate into the amount of time that's a contribution to the lab. That's what I'm saying.
Good point. Lauren, we haven't heard from you, and I should know, are you a staff or a student?
I'm a research tech, and then I do some lab managed stuff for the Viper Institute. But I graduated in May of 2018, so I'm a recent graduate, and then hopefully grad school soon. So
great. Did you work as an undergraduate in a lab?
I did, and I think I went to school in Michigan, so a really tiny liberal arts college. But the way I got involved was I did really well in one of my science classes, and the professor just invited me, so that was helpful. I didn't really know that that was available, and my school didn't advertise that there were opportunities for undergrads. But I guess if you have a good professor and you can join their lab, I think that's typically a good segue. But I know it's different here, so.
Great. Good. Yeah, Blake.
I have a question. I've been assuming that we were talking about paid undergraduates. Does everyone pay their undergraduates? I guess that's actually a question that we probably should establish, right?
You read my mind, because that was going to be my next question for everybody. Maybe you can put in the chat. Do you pay your undergraduates? And if so, how does that change your expectations? So curious about that.
I'll get the chat back again.
So UBURP is if everybody doesn't know what UBURP is, that's the Undergraduate Biology Research Program, and they will generally pay half, and the mentor pays half. UROC and Mark, actually, I'm sorry, I don't know if that is the program pays or the mentor pays for those students.
The program, they get a stipend, at least during the summer, and then it's part of their coursework, and they might still get a stipend. I'm unclear on that.
Okay. And then work study. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think people probably don't take advantage of work study enough. Anne, can you tell us about that?
Yeah, when I was years ago, when I was an undergrad, I went and used work study. And so I was really surprised when I was hiring students, and I was like, ask about work study. And they're like, what's that? So yeah, both of our students now are on work study, and it's great because they pay, oh, Peter would know exactly, but it's better than half. So it's a fraction of what I have to pay, then the government pays the other part. And it's great for them too, because then they get kind of they get experience. So.
Right. So that's something the student goes and initiates.
And they have to work through financial aid. I mean, it's one of those bureaucratic things, but it's great experience for them, because throughout your life, you have to apply for grants and do things. So I think it's a really good experience that they have to work with this entity and figure out how to get it, how to keep it in the summer, what they need to do. There's certain rules. So, but Peter's been instrumental in helping us guide the students to where they need to go. So.
Okay. All right. So opportunities for helping students to bring in their own funds as part of this, and then mentor paying. Philip, yes and no during the semester. No, the good ones that do well in research and like to work in the summer get paid over the summer. Undergrads with experience, they get paid. For those wanting to learn, they either intern for hours. What do you mean by intern for hours, Blake?
Course hours, or like senior class hours.
All right. Yeah, so my kind of feeling is that if students are paid, then they have to meet deliverables, right? Because I'm paying them from a grant, and that grant has deliverables, and so they have expectations. And so it may involve more grunt work. If we have a 200 mouse study and somebody's got to dissect all those animals and do all the histology sections, then I'm going to pay them. Of course, everybody has access to that, and actually I've found that most departments are pretty good if you want to have a student work for course hours in your lab and you don't have an appointment in that department. Generally, they'll figure out a way of working out the administration so you can do that. But then it's a class, right? The student is paying. So that kind of changes the dynamic. And I don't know about other departments, biomedical engineering, optical sciences, you have to fill out a form about what the learning objectives are. Optical sciences is actually kind of amusingly detailed, where you have to put down what you're going to get graded on and what percentage of your grade that means. And, 10% of your grade is reading the literature to discover about the project, and, 30% is building a prototype, and et cetera. So those things, oftentimes I actually find they're more work for me, because then I need to help the student, figure out a project and assure that they move along with it. But I still try to make sure that that's kind of generally advancing the theme of the lab, even if it's not directly supporting a grant. Do other people have ways that they deal with students doing course credit?
I think that it's very important that students, right off the bat, make them understand that they have to learn how to communicate what they do as well. So I always have my students, my undergraduate students, give presentations after they've been in my lab for 6 months. They start making presentations in my group meetings. And I think this is very important, because as I point out to people, the way you communicate your science to the rest of your colleagues and to the rest of the world will be probably the most important way in which you make progress in your career. If you don't know how to communicate what you know and what you do, then you're going to have trouble. And so I tell them that this is a very important part of their training, not just what they do, but how well they can explain what they do and let the rest of the world know that what they're doing is important.
Excellent point. All
I
right.
had a student. Oh, I guess we're out of time. Never mind. I'll share that story later.
Well, can't wait to hear sometime. But yeah, we are down to the last couple of minutes. And any parting thoughts that anybody has, or questions, or anything like that? All right. Well, thank you. I just want to recap a couple of things that I heard. I love the idea of an undergraduate seminar series. I know we took the First Floor North BSRL people, and we did a little introduction to biophotonics seminar one time, and had everybody present on very basic things about tissue optics and stuff. And so that was nice, but maybe making that more building wide or more BIO5 wide would be an interesting idea. Let's see, we talked about number of hours and pay, recruiting from clubs. I like that idea. We should all find out what the clubs are in our area and go volunteer to talk at them. Making non-scientific connections, all kinds of really interesting things. I picked up a lot of tips, and I hope you all did too. All right, well, thank you. It was great having a chance to talk with you. Hope to see you next month. Take care. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.